Hi there, I'm Zach Kircher, and you're watching Kircher Talks Entertainment. So there's this phrase that gets thrown around a lot these days, specifically, and I quote, "There are no good movies anymore." It is such an easy topic of discussion because there are tons of people who feel this way. And because it's such an extremely common opinion that people have, I felt intimidated about throwing my hat into the ring and saying my piece about it. In fact, I've actually rewritten and poured over multiple versions of this script, mostly in my head, for quite a while now. But no longer. I think it's about time. Everywhere you go, it seems like every new movie is a remake, a sequel, a prequel, spin-off, or as one of my favorite critics, Josh Larson, tends to label them as, reheats. For those Hollywood movies that are truly original, they might be underbaked, predictable, and or come across as recycled takes on something you've already seen. If you feel this way about movies, I don't really blame you. Movies just aren't made the way they used to be. I know it, you know it, we all know it. Yet at the same time, this belief that there are no good movies anymore is a massive excuse for lazy moviegoers.
What you say is heresy.
I believe that the state of the movie industry today has just as much to do with moviegoer behavior as it does with the people who make the movies. But there's a lot to unpack with that statement, so let's get right into it. First things first, Hollywood is a machine that only exists to make money. I mean, that's the obvious part, right? We all know that. They may use art as a vehicle to keep their lights on and their bellies full, but at the end of the day, like, movies, music, television, video games, whatever, they're all made so that the money can flow. The movies that make bank are the ones that are engineered to appeal to the most people around the world as possible, and in order for them to work like that, they have to appeal to people of all walks of life. Depending on what movie it is, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, but generally speaking, this need to globalize and to make something safe for all markets means that those kinds of movies aren't exactly like, I don't know if genuine's the right word, but they're not quite the vision of a single person. They're made by committee. Their creative vision and stories that might have been honest at one point may have been stifled to be as inoffensive as humanly possible. Why should it matter if these movies aren't that challenging or creative, though? I mean, people know what they like, and if they're fine with only going to the big budget movies, then in theory that should be just fine, right? After all, movie-going can be very expensive these days, so it's understandable if people only go every so often and choose movies that are safer bets. But here's the thing, time and time again, that which is familiar has proven to be what sells at the box office. I mean, just take a look at the top 20 highest grossing movies worldwide last year. I mean, just look here at Box Office Mojo. I mean, sequel, remake, video game adaptation, sequel, anime adaptation, which is also a sequel. You got a remake, you've got a, well, I mean, that's based on sports, but I mean, it's basically like a brand movie. You've got a superhero movie that is a reboot. You've got The Final Mission Impossible, which is a sequel. A reboot of a superhero property. A sequel. That's probably one of the only original things on here. Sequel. Book adaptation. Sequel. And then another original property. That is 2 out of 20 for the top 20 last year that were original movies. 10%. It's crazy. Movie studios don't just want money, they want all the money. It's especially important to know that there's a lot more that goes into a film's budget than just what they spent to make it, you know? And that makes it so that Hollywood wants to minimize all possible risk that they can going into the release of their film. When you factor in things like the fact that they share revenue for box office tickets with theaters, there's costs for distributing the movies, they have to market the movie, of course, and then there's contract bonuses for actors and filmmakers. And so, when you think about all those things, a movie that is made for $200 million does not make a profit when it earns $201 million, you know? It's got to make a significant amount more money than that. In fact, statistically speaking, a movie made for theaters generally has to earn 2.5 times its production budget to at least break even. So with that, you might be asking, well, why not just make cheaper, smaller scale movies? The easy answer I could give to that one is, yeah, people are doing that. But all of y'all are ignoring those movies. I don't want to get ahead of myself though, so I'll discuss that in a little bit. If I had $100 million to invest in film production, I would rather split it into at least 10 movies with like $10 million budgets each, rather than a single gamble with that whole wad of cash. Because at least that way, a couple of those might win a major profit opposed to hedging all of my bets on a single movie that could fail. However, I know that Hollywood does not think this way, and most likely because of an insightful Hot Ones episode with Matt Damon from a while back. In this interview, Matt Damon talked to Sean Evans about how back in the 90s, 2000s, and even in the early 2010s, mid-budget movies could afford to not make all of their money back because they would have a literal shelf life on home media. I mean, VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray would be a whole nother revenue stream to where a movie could turn a profit even if it failed at the box office. As you may have guessed though, the advent of streaming services slowly caused home media to fizzle out, and now these movies made for smaller budgets are either expected to make, their money back pretty much entirely in the theater, or they're sold off to a streaming service in the hopes that it will drive up subscriptions or at least retain current subscribers. Are DVDs, Blu-rays, and 4K discs a completely dead form of media? Of course they're not. The market has just changed. It's still a very healthy industry that generates tons of revenue each year, but it's kind of like what vinyl is for music lovers. Freaks like me who still enjoy collecting movies on discs like we're hoarding treasure are always going to exist, but buying movies that way is nowhere near as mainstream as it used to be. I'll bet you that if you asked any of your coworkers at the water cooler, none of them have bought a disc for a new movie in the past 10 years. So with all of that being said, can you see why Hollywood is not necessarily incentivized to make more unique original movies? Making original movies was already a risky venture to begin with, but it's a significantly bigger risk now that the opportunities for turning a profit are smaller. I don't necessarily want to say that Hollywood has no other choice but to produce safe and predictable slop. I don't work in the industry after all. But what other conclusion can you make here? If it's what studios need to do in order to sustain their houses of falling cards, then it's what they're going to keep doing. But even with that being the case, Hollywood is not entirely to blame here. This might be hard for some people to hear, but honestly, the long and short for why people believe there are no good movies anymore is because of you. People often talk about how there are no good movies anymore, but those same folks would probably only attend a movie once or twice a year anyway, like how a lazy Christian might only attend church on Easter or Christmas. Unlike how gaming, TV, music, and even books are thriving arguably more than they've ever had because they've adapted to the changing market, I feel like over time, movie-going is the one type of, popular entertainment that has not quite kept up with, changing interests. Those other industries can survive off of more casual enjoyers because the people who are hardcore into their hobbies they're really into it. But there's also an argument that could be made about how much social media and user-friendly apps targeted at those niches have made it very easy to engage in those hobbies. By comparison, what do movie fans have? IMDb? Letterboxd? That's not a dig against Letterboxd, but I mean, come on, it doesn't have the exposure of something like Steam or Discord, you know what I mean? These apps have their place, and many people do use them, but not enough to seriously engage the average moviegoer. So in one way, I can understand why such people wouldn't really know if there's anything interesting playing in the theater. People have allowed social media to train their brains to let information come to them rather than seek out information for themselves. If one's algorithm on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, or whatever other app they're using isn't curated around a movie-related niche, chances are they're never going to hear about a new movie that could actually legitimately catch their interest. I say that knowing full well, since I'm subscribed to and frequently watch videos from a lot of movie and gaming-centric YouTubers, I hear about new movies and games all the time. If I didn't do that, though, I would have to look a lot harder to find movies worth my time. It didn't used to be this way, though. I'm old enough to remember that word got out about movies in much different and likely much more effective ways. Even when the internet as we know it today was still in its infancy, everyone knew that if you wanted to look up movie showtimes, you only really had a couple of choices. One, you called the theater, which was annoying to do, or you could go with the easier option of opening up the newspaper. The nicer thing about the newspaper is that if you were to look up showtimes in the entertainment section, you would also find reviews for those movies you were just looking up times for. Streaming services also really weren't a thing until Netflix launched their service service for the Wii in 2010, so before then, TV was still consumed through local networks or cable. By the way, does anyone out there remember having to insert the Netflix disc into their Wii so they could watch it? Those were the days. And what happened when you would watch traditional TV? Ads! You'd see them all the time. A lot of those ads were for movies too, which would say when those movies were coming out, and when you got to like the week of the release, they'd say, in 2 days, tomorrow, out now. You would know when those movies were coming because those are very targeted and widespread commercials. And sure, you still get ads on streaming services, but those ads are targeted at your browsing history, so it's much less likely that you'll see ads for new movies, because on TV, you just got what you got. The average moviegoer would also get excited about seeing a certain movie because an actor they liked was in it, whereas now that social media has, for better and worse, exposed sides of celebrities that not even tabloid magazines could do in years past, a pretty face isn't as easy of a selling point. And last but certainly not least, once someone actually got to the theater, enticing posters strewn across the cinema hallways would hint at movies to come in the future. I mean, that's still a thing, don't get me wrong, but when our options for information on movies was slimmer, posters were a more reliable way to learn about something coming up in the near future. Plus, people in the 2000s may have been glued to their phones as they were texting sweet nothings to their boy and girlfriends, but certainly not as much as they are now. So who's to say that people are even looking up at the posters, much less paying attention to them? I could keep going on, but by now I'm hoping you've caught on to my point here. Yes, Hollywood has left a lot of people starved for more meaningful entertainment, and I agree that it's a morally depraved and creatively bankrupt cesspool of big business down in Los Angeles. But that doesn't mean that there are no good movies at all. Far from it, in fact. Film fans like me might be inclined to say that the most interesting movies of our day and age come from studios like A24 and Neon, and yes, they would be right. But that also isn't entirely true either. Every studio has at least a couple of gems that they sneak into theaters every year. And to prove my point on that front, I am going to list off some examples of good, maybe even great, movies that have been released in the past 24 months that I'd like to think have widespread appeal. So here we go. Challengers, a love triangle tennis movie starring Zendaya. The Substance, a truly demented body horror movie for the beauty-obsessed age. Longlegs, a police procedural horror movie that is sorta reminiscent of The Silence of the Lambs. Abigail, a group of thieves are stuck in a mansion housed with vampires. Trap, a serial killer takes his daughter to a concert that may or may not have been set up as a trap for him. Monkey Man, Dev Patel's directorial debut that is basically John Wick in India. Juror Number 2, directed by Clint Eastwood, this movie centers on a guy who's called to be part of a jury for a crime he realizes he might have been involved with. Thelma, a very old lady goes on an urban adventure to get her money back from people who scammed her. Weapons, an entire classroom of elementary schoolers vanish in the night, and the townsfolk struggle to find out why. No Other Choice, a Korean man loses his job and then decides to eliminate his competition so he can secure a new one. Eternity, after a woman dies, she goes to the afterlife, only to be confronted by the choice between her first husband who died earlier in their relationship, or her second husband who she spent the grand majority of her life with. Novocaine, a guy harboring a genetic disorder that causes him to not feel any pain, goes on a bloody adventure to save his kidnapped girlfriend. Rental Family, an American actor living in Japan is hired by an agency that places actors into the lives of lonely people seeking connection. Roofman, the true story of the roofman robber who lived in a Toys R Us for months after escaping prison. Black Bag, a whodunit where top spies at MI6 try to find a mole in their organization by trapping them all in one location. Nirvana the band, the show, the movie, which is basically Back to the Future Part 4. Exit 8, an adaptation of a video game of the same name where a Japanese man has to escape an endless subway tunnel. The Ballad of Wallace Island, a British man wins the lottery and decides to spend it by hiring his favorite musicians to play a reunion gig at his island home. And last but not least, Obsession. This horror movie just came out, and it's about a lonely guy who gets much more than what he bargained for when he makes a wish that his crush would fall in love with him. So what, that was like 20 movies that I just listed off? I'm sure there are many others that I could have mentioned, but the point I was trying to make here is that none of those movies were made with the intent of being these like massive events that drew in tens of millions of people, you know? These movies were made with heart, artistic integrity, and a desire to make something fun for people to watch. Some of those movies were hits, but others were complete flops. Yet all of them are the kinds of movies that would have completely captured the zeitgeist if they were released in a different time. Good movies are out there, People just need to learn how to look for them. Or rather, as Friendly Space Ninja put it in a video similar to this one called Incredible Movies Nobody Watched,
cinema isn't dead. Curiosity is.
So what are we to do about all this? Well, I think there are two main calls to action here. Firstly, I'm speaking to all of you out there who don't go to the movies that often. If there are factors like your daily schedule, family situation, or frankly your finances that are keeping you from going to the theaters more, that's okay. I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to shame you for not going to the movies as much as us weirdos who are subscribed to things like AMC A-List or Regal Unlimited. If you live in a small town with an equally small theater, I know that can also limit your options for what you can see. Still, if you catch yourself saying that there's nothing good playing in theaters right now, be honest with yourself. Did you actually take the time to find out if that was true? All you have to do is spend a minute or two with like a Google search to see what's playing in your area. Ask ChatGPT to find a movie playing near you that fits certain criteria like genre, filmmakers or actors or whatever. Go on to Fandango or an app for a local theater chain to see what they're playing, for chances are that you'll find at least something that piques your interest. Take it from me, with how many movies are still coming out on the regular, which is a lot more than you might think, I guarantee that there's something waiting for you. All you really have to do is just take the time to find it, man. You'd probably be pointlessly scrolling on your phone anyway, so why not do it? You might just surprise yourself if you just look. But for my fellow film fans who do frequent the theater though, you probably don't have this same problem. Like I said earlier, if you're a hardcore movie fan, I'll bet that you have already curated your social media around your cinematic hobby, so it should be easy for you to stay tuned with what's coming out. But that doesn't mean you're guiltless in all of this. In fact, I would argue that there's an even greater responsibility that rests on your shoulders in all of this. Because if you get pissed off when people say something like cinema's dead or there are no good movies anymore, speak up if you hear that kind of talk. I mean, don't be an obnoxious jerk about it, for being snooty isn't going to convince your friends and family to see that new black and white French language movie that you had a transcendent experience with, but it also won't help if you sit and stew when you hear such talk. Business thrives on people generating word of mouth, and it's no different for the movie business. If you're a movie lover, your friends and family know that you're a movie lover, and so they're gonna look to you for recommendations. I say that because it happens to me all the time, and I make sure to tell people if I had a good experience with a movie that they may also like. Hollywood making slop is not likely going to change unless there's a massive shift in what consumers want and that the money reflects that shift. But when it comes to the smaller budget movies that fly under the radar, I promise you that the average moviegoer is not going to hear about them unless they seek them out or you say something about it. Cinema is far from dead as an art form, and I'm sick of people saying that it is. But unless we do something about it, well, that feeling is never going to change. I hope it does though, because indeed, there are still plenty of movies out for you and me and everyone to enjoy. People just need to know how and where to find them. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider giving a like and subscribe to the channel. For doing so really does help my channel grow, and I will see you all in the next one.